And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our moderator for the 2018 Roma Ministers Forum, Nigel Belchamber.
Thank you very much. As our moderator, or as our announcer Brian said, good afternoon and welcome once again to the Ministers Forum. We have I'm trying to look and see how many, we have a few vacant seats up here for those of you against the wall if you need a seat, and there's a few over here as well. As he said, my name's Nigel Belchamber. I'll be your moderator for this afternoon. Before I get into the reading of the rules, I'd like to introduce the ministers that are here for you. You may be able to read their tent cards, but you may not be able to, so just in case. On my far right, Laura Albanese, Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. Hold your applause till the end. We're really tight on time. Chris Ballard, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Bob Shirelli, Minister of Infrastructure. Deepika Demirla, Minister of Seniors Affairs. Stephen Del Duca, Minister of Economic Development and Growth. Kevin Flynn, Minister of Labor. Michael Gravel, Minister of Northern Development and Mines. Welcome back, Minister. Dr. Eric Hoskins, Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. Marie-France Lalonde, Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services and Minister of Francophone Affairs. And Kathleen Wynne, our Premier, and also here today in her capacity here as Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Continuing on my left, Minister Morrill, you've just heard. Beside him, Jeff Leal, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and Minister responsible for small business and long business cards, I think, too, Minister. But beside him, Harinder Mali, Minister of the Status of Women. Oh, we have switched on us. Okay. Another new minister. Diane Verneil, Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport. So then I'd better take a very close look to see who I have next. Okay. Catherine McGarry, Minister of Transportation. That's Indira Naidu-Harris, Minister of Education and Minister responsible for early years and childcare. Yasser Naqvi, Attorney General and Government House Leader. Charles Souza, Minister of Finance. Glenn Thibault, Minister of Energy. And I think the vacant seat, if I'm not mistaken, will be for Peter Milchin, Minister of Housing and Minister responsible for the Poverty Reduction Strategy, and he will be joining us shortly, I'm told. So I believe that's it, so if you wouldn't mind, you can now welcome. So we're going to be on a tight time schedule, so I'm going to move through the rules fairly quickly. This is an opportunity for you to pose questions of general municipal interest. This isn't about a specific issue in your municipality. That was what the delegations were for, and I understand there were dozens, if not hundreds, of those today and yesterday. If you do get into a local issue in your question, don't be surprised if I interrupt you and ask you to try and make it more broad. You must begin by stating your name and municipality and the one minister or the one member of cabinet to whom you wish to address your question. And as I said before, the Premier is here as Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, so don't be surprised if you decide you're going to pose the question to her anyway, and it's not an intergovernmental affairs question, that either she or I punts it to one of the other ministers. So we'll be wise to you if you try that, right, Premier? You only get one question because I see the numbers that we have lined up already will probably take all of the time that we have. So one question, no multi-part questions, no supplementaries, and no rebuttals. This isn't a debate. And I think you should be able to pose your question within 30 seconds. That's pretty aggressive, but I think you can do that. If you run over, or if you run too long, and it looks like you're getting into a speech, don't be surprised. I'll interrupt you, ask you to pose your question. And if I don't get your cooperation, Brian at the back knows that this means cut the mic. It works. If you have a second question, you might be able to get it in if you scurry to the back of the line. And the final rule is always, if the need arises to add additional rules, I reserve that right. So, you're going to start with microphone number 1, please.
Thank you,
Name and
Nigel.
municipality.
Wendy Landry, I'm the Mayor of the Municipality of Shunion. I'm the President of the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association. My question today is for Minister Sousa. There has been a lot of media attention about cannabis cost sharing of 75% of the federal excise tax between the province and municipalities for the new costs we both will be sharing. Federal legalization of cannabis will lead to more work by municipalities. Will property taxpayers have to ante up, or will you be making sure that municipal governments are held whole on new costs as the province has many more revenue sources than it can draw upon, not to mention that you can run a deficit budget and we cannot? If you covered 100% of our new costs, think you'd get a strong and positive reaction from this group.
Okay. Thank you. Minister Sousa, I think the mics are all live.
We do want a positive response from this room, and as you know, I have been fighting hard with the federal government to ensure that we get incremental increases to support municipalities. We want to have cost recovery in a program that's actually being designed and brought forward by the federal government. We did negotiate a 2-year deal last month to provide for greater excise tax revenue to support those that are actually incurring the costs, which is going to be the municipalities and the province. We also recognize the need to share in that increase so that we provide for you to ensure that you are not shortchanged. We recognize that the incremental costs that are going to be achieved in some municipalities may be greater than others. We know that there's going to be a greater store locations, and the control model that we're implementing as a province will help also reduce costs over the longer period. But the initial outlay is going to be substantive, and we need to find ways to recover from that cost, and which we know won't be enough from the federal government at the start. So, as a result, we have been working closely with the municipalities. I have done a lot of outreach. We are now working on the next phase, which is a technical and staff table so that we can ensure we understand what those costs will be for the respective municipalities. We are also going to have discussions with AMO and others with regards to the political track so that we ensure that you're protected. And then ultimately, it'll come back for an MOU for a proper funding arrangement that meets your needs. We're committed to doing that. Our caucus, our premier, recognizes the impact this has on municipalities. We want to make certain that as we bring forward this system, there's going to be requirements for public health, for enforcement, for advertising, for employment. There's also going to be some benefits to the community as well. We want to make certain that we're protecting you through your sources against crime. There's a substantial amount of the market exists. There's a lot of criminal activity there now. We want to combat that, and for that we need the support of municipalities and your enforcement agencies and bylaws. So we are going to do everything we can to ensure that municipalities are not hurt by this, that we do what's necessary through our arrangements with the federal government to protect your interests. And of course, that's a 2-year program. What happens thereafter, we need to also be diligent to make certain that all of us are protected, including the province. To your point, I don't want to run a deficit here. I want to make certain that we continue a balanced approach.
Thank you, Minister. This is a really good time for me to say I'd like the ministers to keep their answers as brief as possible, given the time as well. Now, I know it was a brand new topic that required a complete answer, but just in the same line, the last time we had one of these forums, I promised a pen to the minister who had the shortest answer. That was Minister Ballard, and he didn't get the pen yet. So, Madam Premier, would you pass that down the line to Minister Ballard? And I actually brought 2 more with me. I've got one for the shortest question and one for today's shortest answer. And think about it, even no is shorter than yes. So, microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Gail Ardell, Town of the Blue Mountains, Deputy Mayor. My question is to the Minister of Education. Minister, up till last week, you were the Minister of the Early Years Portfolio, the Minister responsible for the status of women. Under your watch now, there is hostility towards women entrepreneurs in the childcare sector. Early childhood educators are trying to operate daycares in communities across Ontario. The Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario estimates that your government has forced out of business up to 1/4 of the Ontario daycares with the much needed infant, toddler, and preschool spaces, the spaces that government hopes to replace by spending billions of dollars on school-based daycare sites to the benefit of the unions. My question is, why did your government establish policies to close down so many community daycares run by women entrepreneurs in Ontario and now wasting billions of dollars replacing their high-quality daycare spaces with lower-quality school-based daycare sites?
Thank you.
So,
Minister?
Thank you for asking that very important question, and I really want to say to you that we are here to transform the way we deliver childcare in our province, and we are doing everything we can to strengthen the system. So number one, in terms of what we heard in terms of our consultations, was that people wanted more access, they wanted more affordability, and they wanted quality. And so we are really moving forward in a multifaceted kind of way, multi-level way, in many different ways to ensure that we're building the system that will ensure that children and families and parents get the support that they need. And so when it comes to what we're doing a number of different things. So we are absolutely, you're right, expanding the number of childcare spaces, both in schools, in public spaces, but also improving the supports that we have in place in terms of licensed home childcare. We are creating base funding to allow operators to be able to expand what they're doing with licensed home childcare. The bottom line is this: we are going to deliver 100,000 more childcare spaces over the next 5 years. We are making historic investments. We are on track for that. In fact, we're ahead. We were actually theorizing that we would be by now moving forward with about 8,000 childcare spaces in addition to what we already have. But we are actually now on track to deliver 11,000. That's something I am very proud of. I think it will help a lot of families, and we are doing this in a way that I think engages everyone. In my conversations with the sector, whether it was childcare providers who are doing it from their homes, or whether they are working in childcare centers, or whether they are working with groups, we have consulted along the way, every step of the way. And so I really want to say to you and assure you that those voices at the table, and I have a table called MEAC, are very strong voices. And so nothing has occurred over the last few months without having their input, their consultation, and their advice. But very happy to speak to anyone who feels that we need to do more, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to do more, and that's why we're looking at an affordability strategy and also a workforce strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3, please.
Thank you. My name is Roger Haley. I'm the Mayor of Township of Frontenac-Yonge. My question is for the Minister of Transportation. And first, I want to congratulate the Minister for her new appointment. Madam Minister, the 401 highway runs directly through my community like it does many others. There's been reports that 1 in 5 accidents, traffic accidents, involve large commercial trucks. And the OPP say that 66% of the drivers of these big commercial vehicles are at fault in those collisions. Last week, another OPP report said there have been 26 traffic-related deaths so far this year, up from 7 last year. In the past year, we've seen countless accidents in the 401 involving big trucks, 2 of which spilled hazardous chemicals. One case taking the life of a driver and sending numerous first responders to the hospital.
And your question, please.
My question is this, Madam Minister: will your ministry be committed to work quickly with your federal counterparts to identify the most hazardous goods that these trucks carry and get those trucks off the highway during severe weather conditions?
Thank you very much for the question, and this is an incredibly important question, as we know, for all of us, and in particular for those that are communities around some of the highways, such as the 401 corridor throughout our province. My community of Cambridge happens to straddle the 401, so this is an important question not only to my own municipality but across the way. Certainly when any vehicle is transporting dangerous goods, whether it be by rail, by air, by boat, or by truck, those regulations need to ensure the public safety. Ontario is a leader in road safety. We're usually number 1 or number 2 in the safest roads in North America over the last 10 years, and we aim to be continuing that. So we are ensuring that all levels of government, including the federal government, are coming to make sure that we've got the legislation and the safest way of transporting these goods. When it comes to some of the issues we discussed earlier today in a delegation at my table, and thank you very much for bringing your concerns forward, we'll continue to work with trying to ensure that the industries at the table, the municipalities, our first responders are all at the table to ensure going forward that we can use everything in our means, whether it be public education, different signing of the roads, ensuring that some of our weather cameras and some of the changes to our weather that's been happening very quickly are more identifiable in some of those road corridors where the weather can change quickly. So we will be considering changes going forward. We look forward to continuing with the working group with the Eastern Wardens and those other partners. But the Operation Dangerous Goods will increase commercial motor vehicle and operator awareness of dangerous goods, compliance and requirements through targeted education and enforcement. So we're committed to moving forward with this.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you, Nigel. My name is Graydon Smith. I'm Mayor of the town of Bracebridge, and my question is for Minister Hoskins. Minister, on a number of occasions we've talked about the challenges of the funding formula for medium and multi-site hospitals in Ontario, and notwithstanding some base funding help you've given, a lot of the annual problem seems to get covered by one-time payouts or adjustments, and these hospitals continue to post future budgets that look to another deficit, and they're really operating in a crisis mode, I think unable to deliver the health care that they want to deliver in some of these communities. Minister, I've asked the question before, I'd ask it again. When can we expect to see meaningful reform to the funding formula for these medium and multi-site hospitals in Ontario?
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the question, and we have had a number of opportunities to talk about this and other related health issues, and this is an important one, you're correct. So we have, over the course of the past couple of years, been engaging our stakeholders. We put together a table specifically, and it was on my direction shortly after becoming health minister, a table to specifically look at the funding formula and get advice from the hospital community and the leadership, as well as other stakeholders and experts, to see if it could be improved. And one of the areas that we were looking at specifically were the rural and smaller, as well as the multi-site corporations, multi-site hospitals, of which your community is an example of one of those. I have just recently received the results of that table and those discussions, and they make a number of recommendations. So in the context of our record and activities, you'll recall that earlier this year, as part of the budget, we increased the budget to our hospitals by 3.1%. It was more than $500 million in additional funding. The year before, it was more than $500 million as well. In addition, of course, more recently, prior to the flu season, an additional 1,200 beds were opened across the province in hospitals to deal with capacity challenges and fiscal challenges and the challenges likely to be faced by flu this season. But I hope to, and I'm in discussions with the ministry and our stakeholders to look at as I mentioned, the recommendations that we've received from our table, looking at the funding formula, and hope to be able to speak to that in the not-too-distant future.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 2, please.
Yes, Dennis Doyle, Mayor of Frontenac Islands, Deputy Warden of Frontenac County. A follow-up question to Minister Chris Ballard that won in the pen at the Ottawa meeting, and thank you for sending out the letter to start the Blue Box program. Our residents and our municipalities are all passionate about the Blue Box program, and we've seen the draft plan, and we're not entirely happy with it. We have some concerns that is sadly lacking in detail. Question is, Minister, can you reassure municipalities that the plan will be fair and reasonable for our residents, and that it will be left up that it will not be left up to Stewardship Ontario to make decisions unilaterally during the implementation process.
Thank you. Minister? Should be live.
Should be live. Very good. So I don't have to push the push button. You know, maybe I'd love to win the pen today. So the answer short form is yes. It really is up to both the Stewardship Council and as you know, AMO and others to negotiate. We've set the mandate for those organizations. And the idea is, especially through Blue Box, and I can tell you as a former municipal councillor, we grumbled an awful lot about the cost of that program on the backs of our taxpayers, our municipal taxpayers. So yes, the idea is that there's not a unilateral imposition, that this has to be negotiated, and we'll be keeping an eye on it, and we will let the parties involved know that it needs to be fair.
Thank you, Minister. You are in the running for the shortest answers yet. Microphone number 3, please.
Bernie McClellan, Mayor of Huron East in the County of Huron, and my question is for Minister Hoskins. Municipal governments are spending more than $2 billion annually for health services with absolutely no voice in provincial or LIN decision-making that affect us and our property taxes. And how will your ministry give municipal governments local say and involve us in the healthcare funding and planning decisions as funded?
Mr.
Well, thank you for that question as well. It's an important one. So the recent changes that we've made through the Patients First Act that gave responsibilities to our LINs for the work that was previously being done by the CCACs in home care, for example. There were a number of requirements and opportunities that were addressed in that legislation. The requirement that the LINs consult more broadly. We expanded as well their board of directors, at least the ability for them to expand their boards with the specific guidance that they reach out into the community at all levels to ensure that their boards are inclusive and that they can adequately and confidently receive the good advice of the political leadership as well as the other expert leadership that exists, whether that's from individuals and families, caregivers and other staff within the healthcare system or others that can contribute. The purpose in the first place of creating the LINs was to ensure that the voice of local communities was being heard, that decisions were not being made in a vacuum at Queen's Park in Toronto. I believe that we've been very successful in doing that, but the changes that we made to the legislation were indeed specifically geared to emphasize that aspect of their work and to enable them and give them opportunity to invite direct participation from a broader group of local participants.
Okay, thank you. So far, we've had a half a dozen questions. We probably have time at this pace for about 7 more. Those of you at the back of the lines might want to consider buying a space from somebody closer to the front. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you, Nigel. My name is Ted Komisky. I'm the Mayor of Ingersoll. I'm here with Deputy Mayor Fred Freeman and also Councillors Gord Lesser and Mike Bowman. My question today is for the Premier. Madam Premier, I did enjoy your speech this morning. Thank you. In your 2013 throne speech, it stated, communities must be involved and connected to one another. They must have a voice in their future and a say in their integrated regional development so that local populations are involved from the beginning if there is going to be a gas plant or a casino or a wind plant or a quarry in their hometown. Because our economy can benefit from these things, but only if we have willing hosts. Madam Premier, Ingersoll is being threatened with a...
Mr. Mayor, can you make this one a general question rather than your
It is general.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Nigel. Ingersoll is being threatened by the second largest dump in the province. Will you extend the concept of willing hosts so it encompasses communities being sited for landfills across Ontario? Will you grant municipalities the right to say yes or no to landfills being brought into their municipalities?
Okay. I think that it's appropriate that this one be tossed to the Minister of the Environment rather than an Intergovernmental Affairs position because I think it falls under his portfolio. Sorry, Madam Premier.
Okay. You're up, Chris.
Oh, thank you. So there's sort of two ways to approach this, right? Because we're asking general questions, and we really need to have some general answers, you know. And I can say that our government and our ministry's priority is to, first and foremost, to divert as much waste from landfills as possible, and we've had this discussion. And I know through our waste diversion efforts, we're keeping about 3 million tons of waste out of landfills each and every year. But we also recognize that solutions need to be put in place for waste that we can't divert, or at least divert yet. And I can say that any proposed landfill, any project, it has to go through a very extensive consultation process, and it has to meet our strict environmental standards if they're going to be approved. So I know, to get specific, I know the landfill or the proposed landfill that you're talking about, and it needs to go through that very thorough consultation process. It needs to produce the necessary studies in order to determine whether or not the project can be done in a way that both protects the environment and human health. With this proponent, part of that process, as with all proponents, is that they have to consult with the public, with their stakeholders, with the Indigenous communities. Importantly, they have to consult with municipalities and government reviewers in order to prepare their environmental assessments, you know. And then both a draft and the final are posted for comment. So I can say that we are very committed to ensuring that anyone with an interest, all proponents, go through very extensive consultation and studies before a project is implemented. You know, we need to make sure that projects are, as I said at the beginning, they both protect the environment and human health.
Okay. Thank you. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you. I'm Carol Moffat. I'm the mayor of the township of Algonquin Highlands in the county of Haliburton. My question is for Minister Lalonde. It concerns Bill 175, which mandates every municipality to develop a community safety and well-being plan. As proposed, if a municipality doesn't develop a plan, the ministry has the power to do it for them and then charge those costs back to the municipality. Many small municipalities simply don't have the capacity or the funds excuse me, to create and manage these kinds of plans. One size does not fit all, and it seems just a wee bit prescriptive the way it's written. Minister, can you assure us there will be room for self-direction and delivery of this bill based on local needs and capacities?
Thank you, Minister.
Yes.
Oh.
No, but very seriously, I met with a few individuals all day on aspect of our community safety well-being plan. And the goal is to really ensure that the community, as you said, there's no one size fits all in our community. We realize this. Through the Police Services Act, we're going to be, I would say, leading by bring this. And I understand there's some challenges as to anything that's different. But what I've heard today from other municipal leaders is that they're actually seeing the benefits and some aspect of cost saving and prevention. So definitely, yes, we would be working together. And we're also looking, if I may maybe lose my pen status, but just to tell you that for aspect of resources and opportunity, we've opened the dialogue to see if we could help.
Thank you. Microphone number 3, please.
Thank you. Kevin Eccles, Mayor of the Municipality of West Grey in Grey County. My question is to the Attorney General, Minister Yasser Naqvi. When will police forces, seeing as July 1st, the federal government is saying that it's going to be legal for recreational use of cannabis, when will police forces, including the OPP, know what cannabis testing equipment is going to be used? And I know you're going to tell me that whatever we decide on, the federal government is going to pay for it. It's not going to come out of the excise tax.
Your question, Mr. Mayor?
Well, that was it.
Oh,
what
okay,
equipment?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Minister?
Kevin, thank you for asking me the question. I'm going to pass this on to Minister Lalonde, who will be in a far better position to answer the question around policing and cannabis use.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. How are you doing? Okay, so last October or November, we've actually engaged with our stakeholder on our summit for law enforcement. One thing that I can share with you today is that we're very happy to see that the federal have put some component of criteria regarding the device that's most needed in terms of moving forward for law enforcement to use a device that's going to be approved by our federal partner. So a few aspects of your question is that we are definitely working with and waiting to see the approved device from that component. We've also engaged with our stakeholder from a law enforcement and seeing how we're going to meet the challenges. But at the same time, what I'm hearing is that we do have officers and police services that have the capacity right now, and certainly our OPP are at the forefront of ensuring the protection, the safety in that regard. So we're waiting for the actual device, if I can say. We know that from a perspective of financing and moving forward in the funding, once the device is approved, we know that the federal is explicitly said to us that they would like to help with the cost associated with the purchase of the device. So we're working with them to ensure that all of us actually are ready for this new legislation.
Thank you, Minister. And Mayor Eccles, you're in line for the shortest question at this point. So microphone number 1, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Rick Maloney, Deputy Mayor of Bracebridge and Bracebridge Transit Tour Guide for Minister Del Duca and Premier Wynne. My question is to the Honourable Bob Chiarelli, Minister of Infrastructure. Minister Chiarelli, Ontario's long-term infrastructure plan, municipal asset management planning, and other initiatives will support decision-making on priority infrastructure needs. That is a good goal. But to achieve this, it means that the funding program must be flexible enough to allow local priorities to be funded. And I will say in Bracebridge, we have a 70-year-old arena that we're trying to replace. Can you tell us that the new federal and provincial infrastructure funding will be distributed through a formula method, and when? With the municipal and provincial elections on the horizon, surely an agreement needs to be done long before March if we can have projects happening this summer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That's a very important and timely question. You're probably aware that the Federal Infrastructure Program, which was laid out quite some time ago, allocates $11.8 billion of federal infrastructure funding to the province. The federal government has designated certain envelopes in which that money must be spent. Public transit stream is $8.3 billion. Green infrastructure stream is $2.9 billion. A community culture and recreation stream of $407 million. And rural and northern communities infrastructure stream of $250 million. They set out a process of negotiating with each province and territory in order that we can hopefully get on the same page in terms of criteria and timing and intake process. They set March 31st as a deadline. As of last week, there's not one agreement that has been signed with any province or any territory. We're working cooperatively. We're hoping that we can have that in place. So it's a matter of negotiating with the federal government. The federal government holds all the cards. We try to be persuasive in terms of how that is going to be implemented. So we expect that the intake will probably occur 2 or 3 months after March 31st, and the money probably cannot flow until a year or 2 years after that. So municipalities and the province will have to be very patient in terms of how we proceed with that. That's the process that has been prescribed by the federal government for our $11.8 billion.
Thank you. Microphone number 2, please.
Bonjour, Wache. Hello. My name is Al Spacek. I'm the Mayor of Kapuskasing and also the President of the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities. My question is for Minister Hoskins. Minister, you've been quoted as saying that notwithstanding the 2 fire medic pilots are going ahead, you'll look at arbitration as it relates to the fire med pilots as part of the pilot model development. Minister, this is an initiative that municipalities didn't ask for and don't support, as was voiced by our many municipal associations, FNUM, NOMA, ROMA, and AMO. My question is, given the government's commitment that no unwilling municipal government will be forced to have a fire medic pilot or program, will you commit here today that the legislative amendments to protect us from arbitrators will happen before the House rises for the provincial election?
Thank you. So this is, I know this is an issue of great interest to ROMA as well as many other organizations in AMO, and I've had numerous discussions with AMO, including the MOU table, about this. And to reiterate for everyone here today, the so-called fire medic proposal, which was encompassed in the legislation that was passed recently, it allows for the creation of a pilot project that is intended to either prove or disprove a concept. That concept being that firefighters who are also certified as paramedics, should they arrive on scene and administer support to an individual, the premise is to be proved or disproved. Will that result in better outcomes, lives saved, and improvements in terms of the care provided to the individual? And I think that's something that we could all support. We have explicitly said that we are looking for 2 willing municipalities. No municipality will be forced or coerced into participation. If we do not find 2 willing municipalities, then the pilots will not proceed. If upon completion of the pilots, if there's no proof of concept, as I mentioned, if there's no evidence that it benefits the patient, then the pilots would not then be considered or proceed to a program. The other element of this, which is interest arbitration, which has been the subject of many conversations that I've had, including with AMO and yourselves, it is, particularly given the opposition to these pilots, if I can call it that, I am determined to provide the confidence to municipalities that the pilots will not have an impact on interest arbitration. Our lawyers in the ministry, as well as across government, believe that the legislation has been written and the pilots are constructed in a fashion where that risk does not exist. However, at our urging, we have created I guess I would call it a discussion table between ourselves and AMO, our lawyers as well as the AMO lawyers that are versed in this issue, for us to work together to reach that conclusion. To summarize, it's vitally important that that assurance be provided, and I'm intent on working with AMO and with all municipalities to arrive at that conclusion so that you have the confidence that that fiscal liability will not exist.
Okay. Thank you. I saw Minister Flynn nodding his head at the same time too. So, microphone number 3, please.
Thank you very much, Nigel. It's Randy Hope, the mayor of the municipality at Chatham-Kent. Before you defer my question would have been to the Premier, because it's a cabinet related, but I'll refer it to Minister Thibeault. Minister Thibeault, recently there's been a merger of a utility of the gas companies in Ontario, and it can bring devastating impacts to a number of communities, one being mine, of the merger between the 2 utilities. In 1992, there was established the undertakings, which is by order in council, that protected certain criteria for rural Ontario in those undertakings. My question to you and to your cabinet is, what can your cabinet do to secure that those undertakings in 1992, and prior to that, the establishment of natural gas in rural Ontario continues to be a vital part of my community, but most importantly is not to lose the devastating impact of job losses that may occur through that process.
Okay. Minister Thibeault.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really going to try and go after this pen. I understand the importance of what you're talking about when we're talking about Union and Enbridge and the merger that has now happened. We have talked often with Union and with Enbridge to talk about as things move forward. The OEB is now reviewing all of that pieces, right? And so I understand what you're talking about with 1992, and I'll endeavor to take that back and have a conversation with my colleagues, and of course continue to have a conversation with you as we move forward on that, because I understand the concerns that are on that.
Okay. Thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Yes, Sally Martin. I'm the Deputy Mayor of Central Elgin, and I'm a councillor on the Elgin County Council. I asked last year a question of the Minister of Education, Mitzi Hunter, and I'm not certain whether I should ask it of the current minister or of the Premier, because I've spoken to the Premier about this as well. So I'll let you decide who gets the question. I asked you last year to reevaluate the formula for closing and funding, the funding model for rural schools. And I congratulate you because you did do it, and I very much appreciate that. My concern is it was so late in the year that all the boards had made their decision already. And so I did speak to Premier Wynne and asked if it could be made retroactive to January 1st, 2017. None of the schools in the decisions in the spring of 2017 have yet been closed that I'm aware of. So I would ask you, will you make that decision retroactive to January 1st, 2017, because we know the funding model was flawed?
Thank you. Minister Naidoo-Harris, please.
I want to thank you for that very important question, and I know that this is something that is of particular importance to this audience, and so it's really vital that we answer this. You know, schools play an important role in your communities, and they matter to local businesses, local housing markets, and the livability of the community. I know in a real way just what a key role these schools play in smaller communities, because what you may not know is that when my family first moved to this country, we wound up living in a town of about 1,200 people. And after that, I grew up in a town of about 1,500. So schools are the heart of these communities. And so that is absolutely why we are looking carefully at what needs to happen, because potential school closures are among the most difficult decisions that school boards and communities make. We're taking some steps to strengthen the quality and delivery of education in rural and northern communities. So yes, we've recently launched our plan to strengthen rural and northern education. I'm not sure if you know, but that includes a $20 million fund to enhance the education experience, and in ways that rural communities feel that they need that strength. You know, we've taken a pause on PARG, and we're coming up with some draft guidelines that we will be sharing with all of you in the coming weeks in order to get your input, because your input is so important. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. But we also have to respect the process that got here, and you know, it's important that I respect board decisions, because school boards are there to be the voices of their communities and to work with those communities on the ground. And so the decisions that were made moving along in the last little while were decisions that they took. And I have to say that the PARG and the guidelines that were there for many years. And so those decisions over the years were decisions that were reflective of community needs. But we do recognize that we need to take a pause and come up with some guidelines that need to be updated and better reflect the needs of the community. That's why we're doing this. We want your input in this and the next steps, because this is your chance to have a voice in all of this. If you feel that you would like your school boards to revisit the decisions that they've made, I would encourage you to have those conversations with your school board trustees and to ensure that you let them know that this is something that you would like them to look at again. In terms of what we can do on a ministerial level and so on, those decisions are school board decisions, and we have to respect that. However, we do recognize that those guidelines need to be updated, and that's why we took the pause, and we're going to engage all of you on the next steps forward. And so in terms of community input, extending timelines, introducing requirements that look at community impact, local economies, looking at the well-being of students. All of these things play a vital role, and so we're going to ensure that the guidelines we put in place are more inclusive and work for all of you. Thank you.
Microphone number 2, please.
Hi, Marcus Ryan. I'm a councillor in the Township of Zora in the County of Oxford and the Vice Chair of the Community Schools Alliance. My question is a bit of a follow-up now, I guess, but it's directed at the Premier. The Ministry of Education has done an excellent job in the last year of consultation and engagement in developing the proposed guidelines, which we've yet to see, and we look forward to reviewing them, and also the Rural and Northern Education Fund. Can the Premier assure us that these guidelines that are so needed to more fairly assess the value of schools in rural and Northern Ontario and the Rural and Northern Education Fund to more fairly fund those schools will have a priority, and the regulations will be enacted, and the Rural and Northern Education Fund can get more than the $20 million before the House rises, so that those rural and northern communities can be assured that their schools will no longer have a target on them?
Madam Premier?
Yeah, I'm going to take this one because I can't resist. Sorry, Indira. So I can't guarantee you that there would be an increase in funding. What I can guarantee you is that we're going to tackle this problem in a real way, because it is something that has been bedeviling us as a province for many years. And so the guidelines that are being put in place, that Indira, that Mitzi worked on, take into account the kinds of considerations that Indira has talked about, and take into account the economic viability and health of communities, because that, I think, is at the core of the concern from the municipal side. From the education side, obviously, we're looking at programming for kids and their ability to stay in their communities. So we are going to do everything we can to make sure that you get the support that you need. But as I said in my remarks this morning, we need you working together with school boards, and we need school boards working with each other. So when Indira noted that if there were concerns about processes that had been in place and the question about retroactivity, if the school boards in a community and the municipality in a community and the other organizations think that there's a better solution, they need to come to the Ministry of Education and have that conversation, because we want the best solutions for communities. And we've been rejigging the funding formula, rejigging the guidelines for some years, and we haven't come up with the perfect answer, because it may sound like the perfect answer is to put a moratorium on the closure of schools, but I can tell you, many of you live in communities where the school boards would say that is not the right answer, because they can't deliver the programs for the kids in their schools without consolidations, without collaboration across different school boundaries. So I guarantee you that we're going to keep working with you. I guarantee you that we're going to come up with a better process, but it is a work in progress right now.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Our allotted time is up, but I'm going to exercise my prerogative for one more question, one more opportunity for everyone to win, well, you, Councillor Leverance, but for everyone up here to win the extra pen.
Thank you, Nigel. Bert Leverance, Township of the Archipelago, a resident of the largest freshwater archipelago in the world. Also has the Massasauga Provincial Park. I'd like to start by, number one, saying thank you to all of you for coming before us today. We really appreciate it. My question is, in 2005, it's to, the Minister Souza. In 2005, the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Sorbana, had a commitment to reimburse municipalities for the lost property taxes as a result of the Conservation Land Tax Incentive Program, 282/98. Does the province ever intend to honor this commitment?
I also want to thank all of you for participating and asking these questions. I appreciate the work all of you do. All of us at the table here recognize the importance of this partnership. In respect to the Conservation Act and the theme that was proposed, I know that some of those questions came up today in our discussions. I have my officials that are going to get back and determine how best to proceed in respect to some of those matters. We have done a number of alternatives to provide some support. I know Bill Morrow just announced today and showed you quite a visual of all the uploads and work and all the alternatives in terms of some revenue for the municipalities, but no more needs to be done and more will continue to be done. But in this specific question, I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, just a slight change. I'm in charge of process, but the Premier's in charge of this team up here. And she said, I see 3 more questions. My team will take them. So microphone number 1, please.
Thank you very much. My question is for Chris Ballard. I come from a municipality, Leeds in the Thousand Islands municipality. We are one of many municipalities in Ontario where there's huge biodiversity, but our biodiversity is under great threat from invasive species. I know the province came through a couple of years ago and put through an Invasive Species Act, and we are now monitoring and working with organizations like Plant Council and so forth. But the problem is that all the money is for monitoring and for making sure that species don't move around, which is important, very important legislation that you put in. But at this point, we watch them increasing exponentially without any ability financially to hire the people to remedy the problem. I would like to know when the province is going to put money into remedying the invasive species problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what I learned at the first AMO bear pit I was at is that even though I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, it's really Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry that handles invasive species. So I learned a lot about Phragmites at that AMO event. So I think it's best that I pass that question down to, it's probably who is handling MNRF? I am. Wow.
Or do you want to do it?
No, I think Premier.
Did that ever backfire? Yeah, I know that Minister DesRosiers would love to take this question, but she's currently on her honeymoon. So,
Minister Morrow said he'd like to give it a shot.
Minister Morrow said he's going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Ballard had suffered enough, but because I didn't think the question was going to be for me, I didn't catch the end. But you were saying most of the work was on monitoring, but you were wondering if there was money for dealing with on-the-ground situations that already existed. Yep. So, not that I'm aware of, but we can certainly take it back to the brand new minister and ask her. But I think what I would say, and it does almost link back a bit to what Minister Ballard began by saying, and you raise a really important point, and it all links back, or much of it links back to climate change. You know, the spruce pine beetle, and we all, as northerners here in the room who are from northern communities and who are really heavily dependent on forests, we're seeing the advance of that new invasive species from west to east, and it is decimating forests across Canada. It's going to have huge impacts, and there's not a lot that we can do about it unless there's 3 consecutive weeks of 30 below zero weather, which, as it's explained to me, is the only thing that stops the advance of that particular pest. So we all have a major issue on our hands. I know there's a lot of work that does go into the proactive education side. I know a lot of the conservation authorities are doing work around this from my time in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. But in terms of program funding that may be available to help directly to you, we'll take that back to the minister and see what she can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you. Heather Foster, Township of Amaranth, the heart of Dufferin County. I was at the drugstore the other day picking up prescriptions and speaking with the pharmacist about the new plan for free prescriptions for 25 and under. And it's a great plan, especially for those that are low income. However, the information that the pharmacist gave me indicates that this is a better plan than what our seniors are getting. My question is, when are our seniors going to start receiving the benefits for the province that they helped create to get the same thing that other groups are getting?
I love that question. So, because the Premier has said this as well, her goal in this province, I don't intend to speak for her, but is for universal pharmacare for all. And I'd hazard a guess that you know, I don't see many of them, any seniors in this room, that was pretty slick, wasn't it? That have grandchildren that are benefiting from this. So as of January the 1st, you've probably all heard, 4 million children and youth up to their 25th birthday get absolutely, and this is the difference with our seniors, but those children and youth get absolutely free of charge access to the entire formulary, in fact, the same formulary that seniors have access to, 4,400 drugs. No upfront cost, no reimbursement, no annual deductible, no co-payment, absolutely free. So, in fact, I've talked to a few people that have gone in to get medications for their kids. In fact, we've filled already more than 500,000 prescriptions for about 350,000 children and youth just already in the last 20 days. But I've had conversations where individuals have gone forward with their debit card or their credit card and the prescription and not remembering that this has kicked in, and their pharmacist telling them all they need is the OHIP number, the health card number for that child or youth. So it is an incredible, it is the biggest change in Medicare since, I believe, since Medicare was first created in the 1960s. But we have a long way to go. That's why the Premier has been so active and engaged on this issue in the province, but also nationally and at the federal level, because I think our shared belief is that this is a missing part. It was always intended to be part of Medicare when Medicare was created. This is kind of the next logical step to give all of us access to medications. Do we need to address the costs that apply to our seniors? Of course we do. So, but this was a big first step. We're the first province or territory in the entire country to make this leap forward. And the Premier, as I mentioned, has been working extremely hard nationally. So hopefully, in the not too distant future, with all our partners, including the federal government, we will have truly universal pharmacare, which provides access, equitable access to drugs for people of all ages right across the country.
Okay. It didn't take very much for us to slip from general municipal interest to general public interest. And our last question, microphone number 3, please.
Premier Wynne, thank you for extending this latitude to finish off the last 4 speakers. I can tell you we truly appreciate it. My name is Louis Antonakos. I am the mayor of the town of Carleton Place, and I'm here representing the wonderful Lanark County. Thank you for providing us with this opportunity to interact with you. My question is for Minister Naqvi. I ask this question on behalf of all of my elected colleagues. With all of the changes both implemented and proposed recently within the Municipal Act for March 2019, and in particular regarding the powers of the Integrity Commissioner, I ask you this question. What new mechanisms are in place for elected officials who might have been processed through an Integrity Commissioner's final decision, yet who have concerns regarding that final decision by an IC who I note is not typically an employee, direct employee of the province? Other than a legal and expensive process of a judicial review, what other means do elected officials have to address a decision that may be in question or worse, disputed? The test.
Okay, I think we have it clear. Minister Yakvi, is that your question that you're comfortable, or did you have content on, or is it Minister Morrow's because
well,
it's in his?
I want the pen because I'm going to refer this again to Minister Morrow.
Yeah.
I think I gave it the 2 most shortest answers today.
Yeah.
This is the part of the movie where I'm sorry the Premier extended the latitude to the last 4 questioners. It's a bit of but maybe not such a tough question. So first, the history on the creation of the Integrity Commissioners. So we've listened to ROMA and other municipal organizations. We are delaying the implementation of it. There was some concern from the smaller municipalities around costs. We're allowing smaller municipalities to just hire one jointly if they want to. and well, they're going to have to, one way or the other, they are going to have to. In terms of your direct concern about what would their recourse be if they're not satisfied with the decision, I would say it would be the same as the recourse that existed if they had a problem that came from the general public previously. If there was a concern launched against a sitting councillor and it had to go to a JR or go to the court process, that person would be faced, or the community would be faced with the expenses and the fallout associated with that particular process. We believe that possibly the existence of integrity commissioners may actually prevent publicly elected officials from finding themselves in difficult circumstances that perhaps, if an integrity commissioner had been available to them, they might not have found themselves in. So we've delayed it now till March of 2019. That's when it comes live. And in fact, not only prevent them from getting in difficult circumstances, may actually have the effect of saving municipalities some money to avoid some of those processes that currently do end up in the courts.
Thank you, Minister. And that brings to the end our forum. Minister Morrow, I believe you have an invitation you wish to offer.
So first of all, another thank you. Please join me in thanking Nigel. Year number, you don't even know. Nigel doesn't even know. He has lost track. But thank you to all of you. It's been a great time. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you this evening. There's a reception immediately following the Ontario Government reception in the Grand Ballroom East, which is in the room apparently right next door. And the part of my speech written by Jeff Leal says, I want to acknowledge Foodland Ontario and the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs for helping us serve the best our province has to offer. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to hanging out with you next door a little bit. Thank you very much.